Hey y'all, JP here. Today I am going to be doing an honest take on the HyperX Fury Speed Edition, specifically the XL version, which will matter potentially when I talk about some of the things that I have had issues with and other people have had issues with. So the XL version is 900 millimeters by 420 millimeters. Or for those of you that are inclined to use freedom units, that is 35.4 inches by 16.5 inches. I've played on this pad for around 6 months on and off. I've definitely put in quite a bit of time into the pad in terms of just hours accumulated. And I'm going to talk about some of the things that I do like, that I don't like, and ultimately how I feel as to whether someone should or should not ever purchase this pad. So the first thing is the stitching. The stitching is acceptable quality. It is smooth to the touch. I've had no issues with my arm resting on it or moving on it when I use a low sense. The stitching on mine actually all the way around was in pretty good shape. I know that I did see um, some people online did have issues with stitching out of the box being frayed or raised. I have not had that across the entirety of my mouse pad. I don't know if maybe there have been some QC issues with some batches. I can't speak on that, but I will tell you that my stitching is not bad. The stitching is slightly raised on the actual pad itself. It's not terribly raised. It's not something that I notice when my arm is sitting on there, but it is something to note. One thing particularly, when you first get this mouse pad and open it, it does smell. There is a pungent kind of some sort of manufacturing type of smell right out of the box. And it was a deterrent for a lot of people online on some of the reviews you'll read. I just waited a few days and it did air out, and it has not really been a problem for me since then. Another thing to note right out of the box is that, particularly if you have one of the smaller versions, one of the trends that I noticed across various different experiences that I read about was that it does not lay flat right out of the box, which was also true for me as well with the XL pad. It it was very bumpy and it did take a couple days at the very least for it to entirely flatten out. And I didn't do anything to flatten it out, like speed up that process, which you shouldn't have to, especially in a top tier mousepad. Not saying that this is, but if it was a top tier mousepad, something you would expect would be that it would lie flat. And I did notice that there were a few experiences, particularly with the smaller pads, where people could not get it to lay flat even after laying giant textbooks and smoothing it out by hand and things like that, which is definitely a problem. So it might turn out to be the case that the XL pad, perhaps because of its weight, will be the better one to get if you did choose to buy this mouse pad, which we'll talk about potential reasons why you might get this mouse pad in just a little bit. Going on to the rubber sole, this was something that also seemed to depend on what size you got. So for mine, I've had no issues with slippage. It does not seem to ever not grip the desk. However, I do have the XL version, which does not seem to have this issue as much. I did read some experiences. Now, this is not an experience of my own, because I do not own the smaller versions, was that they were having slippage on the desk. However, it is also possible that depending on what the desk was made out of, the pads on the bottom, the rubber soling, might not be suitable to their desk material. So, something to be mindful of when you're thinking about purchasing this mousepad. One other thing of note is humidity. I do live in western Tennessee, Memphis specifically. If anyone's ever been to Memphis or this area, you will know that it is very humid. It is very unpleasant in the summer. Something that I cannot control to a large extent other than closing windows, keeping AC on, but you will notice some difference during humid times with the mouse pad and the way it feels. So, that is something that is a potential deterrent if you live in a humid climate. I do want to return again to the speed portion of the name. Nothing really speedy about this. I do want to emphasize that it seems somewhat deceitful to call this a speed pad. Um, it's not the slowest pad out there, but it is definitely not a speed pad, so do not let the name deceive you. Now finally, is this an accessible mouse pad? Is this something that someone should purchase ever? Potentially. I could see some reasons why. If it is accessible to you because it is HyperX, you'll perhaps see this more in retail stores. I would say that it's probably better than some sort of average or generic type of gaming mousepad you would see in a store like Best Buy, Target, something of that nature. I did not get this from a retailer. I did order it. If you also could get it at a cheap price, it could be worth it. I think it sits around $30 online right now on Amazon. For $30, you probably can do better. It it is simply just not worth that price point, in my opinion. Overall, though, it's not the worst thing I've played on. I can still perform very well with it. I have played on it significant amount of time over the past 6 months, so it is tolerable, and while not the best, perhaps something that you could explore using. Finally, I do want to touch on some of the aesthetics here. As you'll see, it has a very aggressive HyperX logo on it. I don't particularly like it. I don't hate it, but it's like a smoky red kind of thing. I also could not tell if this has any kind of coating on it. I tried to Google it. I did not find any results immediately. It did not look particularly hard, but I did look on the HyperX's website, and they did not specify anything about it other than that it is a cloth pad. I do know generally that if you have a lot of design on your mouse pad, it is probably coated, which led me to believe that it's possible. Uh, I do not know still. If you have any insight, please let me know in the comments below. Um, yeah, and so that is my honest take on several months' use of the HyperX Fury S quote unquote Speed Edition.